The Bicycle Frame Builder's Apprentice, Chapter 8. Connie's illogical mood of misery continued to pervade the atmosphere, to the point that the Gatside family's New Year's celebratory dinner was seriously in danger of assuming the nature of a dreary and exceedingly gloomy wake before the first course had been served. In the end, the head of the family decided to intervene and take his daughter in hand. "Connie, love, can they come outside? I need your help." She followed him into the beer garden at the rear of the pub. For once it was devoid of people, apart from one small group of hikers sat in the shelter of a wall. "Here, Connie," Jed said, pointing to the corner furthest away from the wall. "Let's sit down for a minute. I need to talk to yous." She followed, wondering what could be so important. The youngster, normally so cheerful and lively, had been so concerned with her own thoughts, she'd remained ignorant of Mikey and Rosie's unusually subdued mood, and Ralph's ill-fated attempts at banter, let alone the frown of puzzlement on her mother's brow. They both took their places, sat opposite each other. Jed remained silent for a long moment, his old watery grey eyes looking straight into her own, as if seeking to plumb the depths of her soul, whilst gathering his own thoughts. "What is it, Feyther?" "This is a very special day for your mum, Connie. It's only a couple of days a year she gets a chance to have all of us together, and it's virtually the only day when she's guaranteed a day off from baking and cooking and looking after us all, waiting on us hand and foot, and I don't want it messed up for her, and I reckon it's in danger of being mucked up, and you, all of us, shouldn't allow your son to be the cause of it. Your mum loves us all dearly, but you are very special to her. She thinks the world of yous, as I do, and all of us do. So why aren't yous in such a despondent mood? What lurking dim and dismal darkness has getting into thee, lass? We've always relied on thee to find the silver lining, not the cloud." It all came rushing out in a stream of quiet but heartfelt emotion, with hardly a pause for breath, softly spoken but no less shocking to Connie's ears. She gazed back at him, completely and utterly lost for words. At last she responded, or tried to. "But we're being robbed blind and I'm to blame," he interjected. "Is that what you're saying, Connie? Because if you are, you're talking bloody nonsense, and that's swearing." She shook her head, shocked by her father's vehemence and his language. He'd never been one to swear, and certainly not in his daughter's presence. "But, look, Connie Gartside, I'm th' head shepherd here. If I'd stood guard watching me flocks throughout neat, like the Bible says the good shepherds did, do they think it would have made any difference? We don't live in biblical times. We are in 20th century, not the Bronze Age, whatever local parson or our superstitious bishop thinks. The biblical shepherds were plagued with sheep thieves, as sheep farmers always have been, but they didn't have Land Rovers in them days, and they didn't have slaughterhouses and wholesale merchants and retail butchers who lived miles away and who they ne'er met in their lives. I'm not to blame for what's happened, and I'm not going to beat myself up about it, 'cause it willna make a scrap of difference. More importantly, neither art thee to blame, so I want thee to go back into that pub, put on a brave face, and be the normal, good-tempered, fun-loving girl your mum and your brothers and sister-in-laws expect you to be. We can worry about other things tomorrow, but today's a day dedicated to your mother's enjoyment. Put everything else out of your mind. Do you understand?" With that, he didn't bother to wait for a response. Instead, he stood up, marched off, and disappeared into the pub without another word, leaving his rather shocked daughter to sort her head out on her own. Connie didn't watch him depart. She was sat with her back to the pub in any case. Nonetheless, her brain was reeling after what seemed to be an onslaught on it by her father's tongue. Having already fallen into the trap of blaming herself for the depredations of unknown thieves and villains she had no control over, She now began to accuse herself of being a self-centered and uncaring source of unnecessary pain to her long-suffering and ever-patient mother. Luckily for her, Ralph soon replaced his father at the beer garden table. However, he didn't sit opposite to her, but next to her. Thus, when he placed his arm gently around her shoulder and asked her why she was so upset, she immediately embraced him, buried her head in his chest, and burst into tears. Now it was Ralph's turn to be taken aback. Connie had never been one to bottle up her emotions, but crying was not a way she normally expressed herself. In fact, the only time he'd ever seen her break into tears previously had been the day she'd had her artificial leg fitted and taken her first faltering steps, unaided by a crutch, following the accident which had robbed her of her lower right limb. And on that occasion there were tears of joy, having previously reconciled herself to never walking again unaided. That had been the point when Ralph assured her she'd soon be able to run, let alone walk, provided she wanted to and was willing to work at it. The two had subsequently bonded in a very special and unique way, he becoming his younger sister's prime motivator, convincing her there was nothing any able-bodied person could do that she couldn't, providing she had the determination to succeed, whilst assuming the role of her principal defender and protector. Thus, on the one hand, he persuaded her to set herself targets and to take risks, and on the other, he watched over her like a hen guarding her chicks or a ewe guarding her lamb. There was a 4-year age difference between them, and Connie was small of stature and therefore looked younger than her years. However, the very closeness of their relationship over the 7 years since the accident had put a relatively old head on her young shoulders. Many in the local community viewed her as a somewhat giddy and reckless daredevil, and a bit of a tomboy, but Ralph knew there was much more to his normally fun-loving sibling than that. He waited patiently for her tears to subside, holding her tight all the while, but saying nothing, as if sensing the time wasn't right for any pearls of comfort or wisdom from him. Eventually Connie's sobs subsided. Then they talked, and slowly but surely Ralph worked his magic in the quiet and thoughtful way only he could. Connie's brain began to slip back into a more realistic and sensible mode, and not long after, in a much more positive frame of mind, she was ready to take her place with her family and friends. A little quieter than normal, perhaps, but no longer the wet blanket she had been not so long before. As she re-entered the room, Jed was on his way to the bar. He smiled, relieved she'd returned, and murmured an encouraging greeting to her. Within moments, any remaining negative thoughts of sheep thieves were pushed firmly to the back of her mind. Richard's 2 youngsters, 4-year-old twins named Iris and Daisy, and the slightly older son of Jem, namely young Jed, saw to that. Auntie Connie, as they all called her, was a clear favourite of theirs, and all were eager to share the teenagers' company. Following their meal, she, along with Ralph, Rosie and Mikey, agreed to accompany Benny and Lily back to Colwell Clough. Jed and Elsie, along with Pearl Grimsditch, were being ferried back the way they'd come, by road, Jem having volunteered to be their driver in both directions. The weather conditions remained cold and dry, perfect for walking, and, as is so often the case at that particular time of year, with firm, hard ground underfoot. Having more or less reverted back to her normal good humour, Connie once more instinctively resumed her role of guide. She led her companions through the back of the pub and the beer garden, and up the lane leading to the trap marking the beginning of the Pennine Way, which took them up onto Kinder, via the steep and increasingly narrow cleft known as Grimesbrook. Their walk along Kinder Edge and back over the shoulder of Kinderlow passed without incident, and all were in good spirits by the time they made their way across the yard and into the warm, welcoming kitchen of the farm and a fresh pot of tea. By then Jed occupied his favourite armchair in front of the fire, snoring softly. Titch assumed his favourite position on the old flock mat. Elsie, cheered by the meal and invigorated by the company and attentions of her extended family, greeted them all, urging them to take their places around the kitchen table with Pearl. Benny announced that he and Lily would be making their way home back to Timperley soon, but the farmer's wife insisted they stay for the evening meal. "In fact," she said, "why go home at all? You don't have to work any more. Stay here tonight. You can take our Jed out for a pint at the Sportsman, Benny. The guest room's available. I thought we might have people staying over the holiday, but things seem very quiet." Benny and Lily exchanged glances. They didn't need much persuading, and soon agreed to stay.